Sam. I'm a senior technical designer at Epic Games. I'm on the technical content team, and I'm here today to talk to you about Project Titan. So, since we're kicking this off, what is Project Titan? Well, Project Titan is, simply put, an effort to build an open-world, mobile-friendly sample game in, as my slide says, possibly the most difficult way possible. Say that because it was also an art jam. We threw an art station where we had thousands of participants come in. The idea was for us to build a beautiful world and invite thousands of people to come in and fill it with beautiful things, package it up as a sample, and share it with the world, which sounds great in practice. Totally easy. But reality was relatively complicated, so I'm going to talk you through the process of creating it, running the art jam, finishing it, and releasing it, and then what we're going to do next. Because even if you're not doing something quite as over the top as what we did, it's still useful lessons for building open-world games with large teams of varying skill sets. So, who is the technical content team? Well, I'm one of them. I'm the tech designer. And what do? We produce content that educates and inspires. So things from us you might know, Stackabot, Crop Out. The Project Parrot is one of our babies. I'm very proud of that one. And we also maintain all the sample projects, things like City Sample, Electric Dreams. So we have a pretty diverse skill set. And we also do live talks, like this one. So Stackabot, Crop Out, we maintain Lyra, all of that kind of stuff. And we'd done all of that. We'd released Crop Out, and we were like, what do we do next? Because we wanted to sort of expand what it is that we do and help people a bit more. Which brings me back to Titan. We wanted to go big. All our prior projects had come out in complete form. You know, we polished them up, we give them that Epic Games love, and we shipped them. But what people don't really get to see is how the sausage gets made, like not just ice fighting on Slack, but also what it's like to be part of a development team building something out, iterating ideas, working out of source control, sometimes completely breaking the project, which I have definitely never done. And there just aren't that many opportunities for people to work on a massive open world project, except if you already work at a AAA game studio. And those jobs aren't super easy to come by. So we wanted to give people who didn't necessarily have the level of experience to get that experience a chance to get a foot in the door and go, oh, I know how this works now. We also wanted to teach good practices, provide the benefit of our years' worth of experience and Unreal Engine expertise. And we wanted to have some special guests come in, lend their expertise, and try and really skill up everybody involved, which is kind of the context within which I am here in Bali. All right. We also wanted to identify areas of improvement, as in what parts of the Unreal workflow are challenging for people, what parts have too many steps, where do people go wrong, what are the misunderstanding of about what things do. It's like when people go nanite means I never have to worry about poly count or materials or anything ever again. Not really. You still have to. You just have to worry about different things. So we had big ideas, we had big ambitions, but first, we kind of had to build it. And it turns out 64 kilometers of open world is a lot of building. So we wanted a large landscape that was a unified canvas for everybody. We needed people to see how all their work interacts. Because one of the things when you're just like making cool models is you don't really see how it integrates into a game environment. So we needed people to see that and how to collaborate with each other in real time. And Unreal provides the ideal tools for that. We have our landscape system, which is iterative, it's non-destructive. We have one file per actor and well partitioned, provide that level of multi-user granularity, level instances, all of that kind of stuff. We did have one problem, though, which is landmass doesn't quite go to the scale that we wanted, to 64 by 64. So we built out this tool. It's a very fast tool to build out the landscape. And so, caveat one, don't do what we did. We built something that is actually, in terms of updating the landscape, relatively difficult. We spent a lot of time working in this preview of the landscape you can see here in this video. And then when we got it to a point that we were happy, this is all basically 1 by 1 kilometer landmass things stitched together. We exported the height map and the weight maps, re-imported them as a landscape. It is a relatively clunky process. If you've taken the Titan sample, you probably know that. So this is a way to work, but not necessarily the best way to work. As you can see, we have real significant improvements to the landscape tool coming in. Use those, don't do this. But this is a system we built in the time that we had to get people building stuff. And it's essentially built with splat maps, We used splat maps to lay out the geometry and then export the height maps. Between Aaron and myself, we had about 600 splats to define the landscape, which was a lot. And it became kind of inefficient over time. Ultimately, we ended up with this 64-kilometer landscape, 8 by 8, 9 distinct biomes. So we had grasslands, marshlands, desert, snow, all the things you kind of expect. Each biome had its own layers of terrain types, so sand, rock, grass. But beyond that, we had built open territory. The idea was it would be empty, people would fill it. Then we had to add some stuff. So tunable day-night cycle. Once again, there is now a plugin to do this for you, so you don't have to write your own. Don't do what we did. Nonetheless, we built this because people needed a day-night cycle. We're building an open-world game. It's kind of expected, and we wanted to lean into Unreal's tech. Built it right into the editor tooling, meaning that people could just literally bring up a slider and change time of day on the slider to see how their art looked in different contexts. We also used Mover. We were probably the first Epic team to actually use Mover, meaning that there was a lot of us showing up to Justin, the lead engineer on Mover, and going, hey, we broke this. What are we meant to do now? But Mover is a really powerful character movement system, especially if you're dealing with physics integration into your world. But it's very modular. Like if you've used the character movement component, it's very powerful, but it's also very discrete in what it does and does not do. Anything else you do, you kind of have to add. Mover lets you just author your own movement modes however you want. So we added the hang gliding, we added zip lines, all kinds of fun stuff. And it's also inherently rollback and networking friendly, so if you're building a multiplayer game, which we weren't, it's a really good place to start. So this let us build an open world game moveset very quickly. Hardest problem to solve during pre-production was development infrastructure. If you are an open world game, you've thousands of potential users, you're going to need a server, right? You're going to need cloud space, you're going to need some technical support. Thankfully, our very good friends at Amazon and Perforce stepped up to help us there. In fact, Jace from Perforce was a huge, huge help on Titan. Jace is here doing a talk. You should go to Jace's talk and learn all the Perforce magic. Because honestly, I've been using Perforce for 20 years, and then you meet a Perforce person, and they go, oh yeah, just run the script. And it does things you did not know were possible. So if you're doing something like this, you're going to need support. So thank you, Perforce. Thank you, Amazon, for the cloud space. It really did help. I'm going to break down kind of the numbers of that later in this talk, but just to kind of get things going. So we had a world, we had a character, we had support and infrastructure. Now we just needed, humans. So we set up the ArtStation challenges. And we announced on ArtStation, we created challenges for level design, environment art, materials, characters, prop modeling, VFX. And we got a lot of interest. About 4,000 people overall registered for the challenges, just over, which was way more than we expected for a team of 3 people. But our producer was currently working on something else, so it really was a team of 3 people. And we had high hopes, but we did not expect that many. But that meant, okay, it's going to be a lot of work. It's a little terrifying. So we spun up a Discord. I want to shout out Tina Wisdom from our community team for taking our terrible Discord that Aaron and I made and turning it into something useful. And we used that to do community management, announcements, rules, because it turns out you need rules when 4,000 people are working on a thing. Creative direction, tech guidance, and of course, support. Like Perforce had their own channel, and once again, thank you, Perforce people. It made life a lot easier. We even created a support ticket system just so it wouldn't get too chaotic. Then it was go time. We went from, in about, say, GDC, we launched the week right after GDC. I'm going to keep saying this, don't do that. Don't launch the week after GDC. We wanted to get it out into the world, but it meant that we had to work really fast to get it out. Began the art jam. To get things rolling, we provided a full creative brief, concept art, tutorial guides, get people up to speed, because a lot of the people coming in, I don't like saying amateur, because amateur feels pejorative, but they're people who had maybe not worked professionally in games before, or if they had, it had been relatively limited. So we wanted to make sure that they understood what was going on and how to work within the system. We designed a brief that was relatively flexible, pre-industrial magical world, barely visible bodies of long dead beings built into the landscape, meaning not giant skulls built into mountains, but you just see the outline of a shape of a person. And aesthetically, our goals were stylized, exaggerated painterly. We wanted it cute and cartoony, friendly. We wanted a stylized aesthetic, not a realistic aesthetic, because realism, people tend to get caught up in realism and you end up in the uncanny valley. We just wanted it to be cute and fun. We provided documents, as in I wrote 9 billion documents. I wrote a 60-page Perforce guide. I don't recommend that, but is the thing that we did. And one of the things we realized is nobody reads documents. Every game developer already knows this. We were blindly naive. We thought, oh, people will read the documents, people will work through it. But the reality is, they mostly didn't. So we meant that the biggest asks we got in terms of support were Perforce. How do we get Perforce working? How do we access the server? And huge thanks again to Perforce and Amazon for helping us with that. We also provided base content, master materials, base character, things like that. Our character was built by Polygon, who you may have seen on YouTube. And the idea was, let's get people up to speed with all the stuff they need to know so they can start making stuff quickly, because we only have 10 weeks. We provided hours of video training content, mostly made on the fly in response to user needs, because we really didn't know where people would struggle. That was sort of our areas for improvement thing to learn. So we made tech art guides. All of this is online, by the way. If you go to the Titan page, it has all of the videos Aaron and I made about how to, say, make materials. I did a lot of design guidance, how forests work, because just because you have PCG doesn't mean you necessarily know how to make something that is actually convincing as a part of the landscape with PCG. Just scattering meshes doesn't really work. So you want to get people thinking about the design side, the creative side of their work, as well as the technical side. And someone said at some point there's more than an entire paid training course worth of content in there. And honestly, they're probably right. Go to the Titan page, watch that stuff. It's really useful if you are entering game development or interested in large world development. We had rules. Not too many, because we really didn't want to limit people, but we had a 24-hour checkout limit. We locked certain kinds of assets. We did not modify the landscape the entire time of the Art Jam, because one, it's complicated, and two, we didn't want to blank out people's work. We limited the amount of assets submitted in a single checklist so people couldn't check out the entire game. And we restricted submissions to U assets because we didn't want people doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We disabled plugins, and we stuck to the launcher build, precompiled DLLs. And we asked people to play nice, because it's very easy to get in creative conflicts with people, and if we're going to do this, we're all going to do this together. We had to ban a total of 1 challenger, 1 person. Everybody else played nice. It was an excellent community. One thing worth noting that we probably would have done different in retrospect is we didn't use asset validators, because we didn't want to stop people working because they're like, oh, this validator says I'm bad and I can't do this work. So in retrospect, I really regret that. We'll get to that in the mistakes were made section. But it was a way to just get people going, because we were really worried that people would sign up and then be too scared to actually submit work. So here's some numbers from that 10 weeks of the Art Jam. That's over 4,000 challenges, halves down to Discord members, because everyone's like, yeah, I'll do it. And then like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work, so you lose that. From that, we got about 1,500 Perforce workspaces, of which 600 people were very active. Ton of change lists, a ton of files. The project got very huge very quickly. I'm going to talk about cleaning it up at the end, but it got really big. And people did a ton of stuff. It was pretty amazing. On the back end, it lived in the cloud. We had 1 Perforce server and 3 proxies. We had a horde set up to do HLOD builds, which was about $8 a day. Thank you, Ariar Bjornsson, for setting up our horde setup. We had Grafana to visualize Perforce server. And Cloud DDC was probably our most expensive thing. It was 22 grand total, which really, for a 10-week, multi-100-person Art Jam, is really not too bad at all. So yeah, these are our stats if you're interested. These are directly from Grafana using Prometheus. Okay, what it boils down to is people made a ton of stuff, a ridiculous amount of stuff, more stuff than we could ever actually possibly review in a human lifetime. And I'm going to throw a little sizzle reel up of cool stuff that people made while I talk about it. I'm going to throw out some stats. So there were 19,000 submissions, 200,000 files, 80 gigabytes of assets, 12,000 meshes, 8,000 textures. We had characters. Characters were more of a challenge because obviously you're making a skin mesh. And what people quickly realized is that characters aren't just modeling someone in T-pose, they are rigging it, they're setting up for animation. And we'd also created this mix and match character customization system, meaning you could have different heads, legs, hats, hair, all that stuff. That's all in the Titan project. You can see exactly how we built it if you download it. So you can play as a default character or any of these weird and wacky people or any hybrid of it. And so all of that shipped with the sample project. You can go check it out. I recommend it. We had a lot of fun building the character customization system. And it's pretty easy to transfer to your project if you're interested. So in 10 weeks, we went from this. This is a screenshot from week 1. Apologies for the naked pink person at the front. I swear they're just wearing very skin-colored clothes. It took us a long time to actually get the character skinny working right, so we have a lot of shots like that. But we went from this to this, 10 weeks. And all this work here that you see is made by our users. It is not made by Aaron or me or Sebastian. This is all PCG. It's the PCG forest. Layering of PCG on PCG on PCG to create this beautiful environment. So I'm going to jump through a couple screenshots while we're doing it. My speaker's notes say no notes, and that's entirely true. I have no notes about this. People did really amazing work. And there were some technical challenges that I'll get into, but visually at least, people really put their best foot forward in trying to embrace our world. So this is from our chemical lands area. People went really wild with the shape language. We have just beautiful cartoon trees. So all of these assets are in Titan. If you're interested in using them for whatever you want to use, please do. Take them, build stuff with them. That's why we made it in the first place. But yeah, look at that. PCG Desert Bloom. I live in Los Angeles. I like going out and seeing the desert bloom. It was very exciting to see that. We have Giant Tree City. We have these beautiful, bucolic, sort of classic video gaming landscapes and all kinds of cultural influences, because the team was from all over the world. We had people in Southeast Asia, people in the Middle East, people in Europe and America, people everywhere, people in Latin America. The whole world was participating on Titan, and so we got this very broad range of cultural influences. However, there were definitely areas of improvement. The end results were really encouraging. We noticed a lot of areas where people could be falling into naive or inefficient development behaviors. And this is useful for you if you are running a team and you have junior staff, because you're likely to see a similar thing, and by getting ahead of this, you can really save yourself a lot of pain. So let's talk about areas of improvement. Nanite. I said this before. People assume Nanite is a magical wand that lets you just do whatever you want. The reality is, you still have to worry about it. And so there was one thing with Nanite isn't unlimited polys for free, but we had a bunch of people who'd been educated, I think, in an old school way, where they were building these sort of way too low poly environments. You could have really upped the poly count on something like this. Like you can see the line there. It is a series of polygons. It isn't unlimited, but there's no point building deliberately low poly structures. You get no performance benefit from it. Build appropriately. So why limit your work, essentially? This was the thing we saw and had to get ahead of. Then there's the opposite, which is topology like this. I'm going to say right now, I'm not trying to target anyone who worked on Titan. Please don't feel bad if this was yours. It's just mistakes that people make as they learn. So you can see the nanite topology of this model. Each of those colored triangles is part of the poly mesh, including those little tiny, tiny ones. And they are not going to desiccate well. It's just such a messy way to build. And all of this topology created this, which is actually quite a nice model, but you don't need that topology. So we realized people needed to actually learn how to build efficiently for Nanite. We did a lot of education material on that. You can watch all of it. And performance was obviously an issue. Games don't magically run well, especially complex open world environments. It takes work. One of our biggest challenges was getting people to think in terms of a modern game engine. A lot of the old rules don't apply, but you can also really hinder yourself. People seem determined to pack the world with NPCs. We had asked people to tread carefully with NPCs and basically not put them in the world. We would create a solution for it that would then add NPCs. People instead just drop skeletal meshes directly into the landscape. Please don't do that. And there are clear performance implementations of that because it's a very naive pathway. There was no crowd rendering, optimization, group logic in mind. So we built an NPC marker system towards that purpose, but it came in really late and didn't get widespread use. I'll talk about more of that in cleaning up Titan. But thing worth noting, don't let people just drop skeletal meshes into your map. A bazillion material slots. If you're a tech artist, this is probably making you very sad right now. So yeah, people basically didn't understand how to create materials properly for Unreal. We had to do a lot of education. We asked for a max of 3 material slots for a thing. Not everyone listened. It got very inefficient. So we had to do a lot of work after the fact, just cleaning all of that up and optimizing. But yeah, don't let people do this. It will make you sad. It will make your game sad. And then also VFX. People often don't assign a VFX type to VFX, which means you don't get draw distance, you don't get culling, you don't get prioritization. So define VFX types, define your rule sets, work within them. That big hotspot that you see there, from very high up, it's just a firefly flying around a lantern in one area that never gets culled. It is invalidating your shadow cache, and it is creating all kinds of problems for one little thing. So VFX types, use them. Virtual shadow mapping. Here is a thing we ran into that I'm putting this on us, not our end users, which is you need a WPO disable distance set, and there is not one by default, which means that, say, you have trees that are using WPO because you haven't used new nanite foliage yet. And they are doing that all the way to the horizon as long as they're rendering long beyond where you see them moving. That means they're constantly invalidating your shadow cache. What you really want to do is put a disable distance. So after a certain point, which is usually not that far, a couple hundred feet, they just stop using WPO animation. Your shadow cache is happy at distance. Everybody's happy. You will get much better performance that way. So we provided base materials with what we thought was all the functionality people wanted. However, in some cases, we had to add some extra things, but we built this really solid master material, which if you're building an open world game, go into Titan, steal our master material. It's really good. It was built by a principal tech artist at Epic Games. But not all materials are created equally. So look at this. I'm going to make tech artists sad again. Sorry. Look at this stone pile in 3D. Look at the material. Yeah. So what we found is people would model something and use Substance Painter and then export directly. You know, you're all professionals. Hopefully you don't do that, but please don't do that. It's really important to not do that. It was like, we were like, why are we blowing out our texture memory? Oh, because this is a 4K texture with each individual rock on it. Sigh. So one of the things I really recommend is we've been working towards like UV-less smart material workflows in Unreal. And if you come to my tech design talk after the fact, I might talk about that a little bit. And that's really useful for sort of more entry-level people who don't understand nice ways to create materials. But educate your people. They might not know. Again, this is another one just to make you sad. Don't do that. I have never seen Aaron, who is our principal tech artist and my boss, more sad than this. He was, steam coming out of his ears, whole thing. So just one of those things, when you're creating, when people don't really know professional workflows, you get stuff like this. I think of it as naive development patterns. And one of the things we can do as senior staff, principal staff, is educate and create the appropriate tooling and materials to prevent people doing this, and also set up validators. I'm going to keep going back to that. We failed by not setting up validators. It would have caught this. So the other issue was characters. Mostly the issue we found with characters was not so much that people did them wrong as they didn't finish them because it's really hard. Even with our cool animation and rigging tool set, we've got these amazing things from the animation team in Unreal. People found characters really challenging. And we realized we'd kind of overstepped by setting up a character challenge, especially with our very complex character customization system. And so that was just a matter of just dropping people in at the deep end and failing on our part. It takes commitment to finish them. So while I would have loved to have hundreds of characters, we ended up with, maybe 30. And part of the problem was people were terrified to bring them into the engine. So they'd be in a sculpting program forever and not get any feedback from us. By the time it was skinned and rigged and working with that character system, it was really late and it was hard to go, okay, what you made is okay, but we could have made it a lot better this way, but they only had 5 days to fix it. So we ended up with characters that were not quite to standards, and we did a lot of work after the fact to bring them up to standards. Another thing, when people bring stuff in late, you get a million duplicate names, and as a technical designer, this hurts my soul. Repeated names when chunking for mobile doesn't work. If you go to Arvin's talk on mobile development, I'm sure he'll talk about this because that is a screenshot that he sent me going, how was this set up? What on earth? So name things appropriately for mobile if you're doing a mobile game, and make sure people bring things in early so you can evaluate them. Mobile builds are hard. One of the bigger challenges we also faced was scale. We had 2 scale issues. Problem 1 was people were not working with the landscape in the larger context of the world. They were moving straight into, I'm going to drop in some props. I'm going to drop in a house and a bush and a barrel and all that stuff, rather than maybe using materials, using Quixel rocks to sculpt out the terrain to be what you want it to be, and getting people to step back and, as a designer, go, look at this larger space you're working in. How does this fit into it? What do you need to change? All of that is very important. And instead, you get things like this, which I ended up redoing post locking down the art challenge, where people instead just sort of drop big rocks on the landscape after the fact, and it looks clunky and weird. So that's one of those things, just generally getting people on board with thinking about the world they're working in before they just start throwing in assets. So the last one, and this is as a designer, something I'm as guilty of as anyone, which is actually testing your work, hitting play, playing an editor. Do that. Otherwise, you get that, where you didn't test your collision. And collision was a particularly big one. There was a lot of, why am I flying hundreds of feet into the air? Why am I floating? And people didn't seem to realize that Epic's modeling tools in Unreal come with a lot of really good collision solutions. So we got a lot of very clunky hand model collision, or just use complex as simple collision, which is not super efficient, or things that were just broken. And it was one of those things where there are tools to fix this, but people were not educated on the tools, which is on us to make sure that they know. So make sure your staff knows good pathways for building collision, and they build collision properly, because it will drastically improve not just your play experience, but also performance in your game. So along those lines, we messed up on a bunch of stuff. I will totally take that. I will take that completely because I feel guilty. We made some mistakes. Our base content was a bit rushed. We launched earlier than we should. I said we launched a week after GDC. At GDC, all of us were doing talks, doing the learning theater, networking, and then we had to come back and ship. And that meant that we didn't have as much example content as we wanted. So we rushed the base content. We didn't have base PCG setups. There were a lot of mistakes made. So the PCG one is key, I think. Some of these, you know to build, your master materials, to provide things, poly count budgets, things like that for your development team. PCG is a weird one. People go, oh, PCG, and just start going wild with PCG. And that caused a huge amount of problems for us in terms of continually breaking Titan so people couldn't open it in the editor. Provide base PCG setups built by a senior tech artist or other, subject expert to your art team, and have them work within that context, and you will save yourself so much pain. You won't actually believe how much happy you are. You won't know the pain. The way I know the pain of going, why is that bush taking over the entire landscape? Why do we have 64 kilometers of this one bush over everything? And one thing we ran into with PCG setups is we used a lot of level instancing just to keep people working. And people would do things where the PCG set up in a level instance that was referencing something that was only in the level instance, not in the main world. And that meant that when you then added that level instance to the main world, often it would crash or go wild and cause problems. We've done a lot of work to optimize and debug the PCG setup since then. But when you're working with PCG, it's something to be really careful about. Ultimately, though, it was our community that pulled us through. Without them, none of this would come together. We found a bunch of people who had actual tech art skill. We deputized them as tech artists. We created a PCG working group to go in and make our PCG kind and gentle to our game versus the reality of how it was, where it was just eating everything alive. So it wasn't just us three magically fixing stuff. There were some really talented people on Titan who came in and were like, especially shout out to Alan Wren, who both did amazing work to get our PCG clean by the time we locked the art jam. So after that, the key thing that was really valuable to us was our community with our Discord. Weekly live streams, live crit sessions. One thing that we did every week was live crit on a live stream on Discord. We tried to do it several times a week where Aaron or I or both of us would show up, fly around the land and give people feedback. And community response is very passionate. I say passionate in that sometimes people were very angry at us and said that I was mean. Sorry. Don't put giant skulls all over my landscape, thank you. But because we found a really good, technically skilled group in our community, we could deputize them within the Discord too, and it really helped. Suddenly, we weren't the only people dealing with support tickets. So if you're doing something like this, which probably you won't, invest in community. It'll make your life better. And this proved to be especially useful. Okay, this is your classic game division nightmare. Game development, game division. I can tell I've been up too long. So, last day of the art jam, 10 weeks. We need to lock it down. Everyone went, oh no, and checked in from Perforce. And they tanked and corrupted our Perforce server. Sigh. It was not great. Fortunately, we had the Perforce team, and we had good community messaging. And then Sebastian, our engineer, was on top of everything, working with the Perforce team. We were back up in less than 2 hours with no work lost, or almost no work lost. But it was one of those classic game development things where good Perforce knowledge really does save the day. We had to roll back, but we didn't lose very much. And also, if everyone checks in at once, go yell at them. Don't let them do that. Okay, so party's over, right? Everything's done. We can just ship it. No. It took longer to clean up than it did to build. So we wrapped Titan. Final live stream, shut down the server live, showed off all the amazing work people had done, gushed about how amazing they were, because they were all amazing. I love these people. I will never have children, but I would name my children after them. Wonderful people. But Project Titan wrapped, and then the real work began. Titan needed to be shippable. It needed to be something we could put out to you folks and not go, oh my God, what is this thing? And I would say at this point, it's not done. I will totally take that now. We have more work to do, but we had to get it to at least shippable. Project was 100 gigs. It was super messy. And once again, don't take this as a value judgment on any of our challenges. They all were doing the best they could in the circumstances, often without prior professional experience. So this is really on us for not educating better, but it was really messy. So this is a thing where actually a lot of this is applicable to anyone doing an open world game. Redirect to cleanup is a really big deal when you have that many assets. And it took several days to actually do redirect cleanup. We found all these problem folders where redirected fix-ups were causing the engine to crash. We had to go folder by folder, finding these crashes, fixing up subfolders, finding problem assets. So fixing redirectors is, a thing you do, but it's actually a good way to find out where you have really busted stuff in your build. And we did it. We had to basically do it one folder at a time. It took a very long time. Ideally, you want to be doing this during production, not after. So, size map tool, which I also talk about in my next talk. Size map is my buddy, because we're like, why are we a 100 gigabyte project? And the answer was, we had a single animation that was 2 gigabytes, because one of our very cool community members had a mocap suit, and they captured 2 minutes of a character doing this. Really beautiful mocap, but, could have been a loop. So we size map. All you need to do is go to your content folder, right-click, select size map. You get that. You can get a full map of all your assets, to size, presented visually. Really useful. And that allowed us to delete or optimize very large files. We deleted bespoke animations and turned them into loops. Some of it had to go. We tried to save as much as we could, but in some cases we did have to delete things because I'm not going to ask someone to download 2 gigs of animation. We also found a ton of unused assets. I mean, I'm a designer. I work in the geometry tools all the time. I use that for gray boxing. I love Cube Grid. I evangelize Cube Grid. But it does leave behind a lot of unused base meshes. We had so many cubes, so many. I think that we had 32 identical cubes when there's also a cube in the engine you can just use. So that was a big thing for us. We had to go through, clean that up, and make sure we didn't destroy anything by deleting them. So one of those things when you're starting to final your project, check your auto-generated geometry folders. You will often find many, many weird and wonderful things in there that you just don't need. And then we did, map warning and error cleanup. We had, I think, several thousand warnings and errors. We went through and tried to get it down to 0. And yeah, I mean, this is obvious. Good practices. Don't have warnings and errors in your project. But it was a really good way to find out, oh, everyone was doing this wrong. If we can do a bulk fix for this using editor tooling rather than just going and manually fixing this. We're like, this is the same error on 600 assets. Let's just write a tool to fix it. So we had a lot of null mesh references because people would do things like not check in, not reconcile their work in Perforce, reconcile your work in Perforce, or you may just leave things on your hard drive. And then we'd have null mesh references, or they would do something else, which I'll get to in a second, which will probably make your head hurt. So NPC marker. We had to go through and replace all the skeletal meshes with our NPC marker system that creates optimized NPCs within the environment. That was my job. It was not fun. And then the other thing, skinned assets, construction script, and repeat firing PCGs can cause massive slowdown when you're modifying anything. So going through, we had to ask people not to blueprint and not to do construction scripts. Construction scripts are not, I think of as a future-facing workflow. Again, come to my next talk for that. But we had to go through and go, you don't need a construction script for this. This PCG does not need to repeat fire. And just generally optimize the work because, yeah, you'd move one thing and then wait 5 minutes, and that's not good, and you shouldn't be working like that. Unreal doesn't want you to work like that. Then external actor level crashes, problem assets. We found all these 0K files that were causing crashes because either they'd been not properly deleted or not properly checked in. So write a validator that finds files that are 0K, and you'll make your life much easier. People also use grouping to organize things and then didn't check in the group actor. Again, please don't do that. It makes life hard. So we had to track those down, eliminate the missing group actors, and there was just a lot of cleanup. These are all things that I think of as naive mistakes that people make. It's best if you educate your staff in advance. We also ended up with a lot of duplicate PCG because people were using PCG inside level instances, as I said, in lots of weird ways. So you'd end up with a PCG overlapping PCG in a way that was hyper inefficient. And we just went and kind of nuked and redid all of that. Real-time material preview is a really good way to spot broken materials, fix, replace, and delete them. We just look for world grid. It's an easy way to find broken materials and then replace them. And then we'd ask people not to blueprint, and people using construction scripts. If you're using, with the PCG framework, you don't need to use construction scripts for most sort of building out world assets. Massively slow down editing the main world, so we had to track them down and delete them. And then here is the one that, again, okay, tech designers, you're going to be sad now. Create a blueprint with a bunch of meshes, but then if you want to customize them, just reset the mesh to default so there's no mesh and the mesh is missing. People did that a lot. Don't do that. It creates a null mesh warning. It's not an efficient way to work. There are way better ways to work within the PCG framework. Don't do that. And then we also ran into actors sitting way outside the level instance space that caused actor bounds to get crazy. This was really common with PCG that was using data in a level instance where it was trying to spawn on the landscape of the main level, referencing something that it could not reference, and thus spawning in a weird outer place. So just keep an eye out for that. Also, packed level actors as a base class without a source level is a very bad thing to do. Don't do that. where people had been, don't use a package level actor as a base class unless there's a source level it's pointing to. You can just right-click, create package level actor. It will do all the work for you. You don't have to do it manually. So there was a lot of that. We had to clean that up. And then, yeah, don't sample a landscape that doesn't exist in the main world. And also, people were using landscape material on normal assets. I've seen this in actual games, where not just Titan. They were like, oh, well, we can just throw the landscape material on that. It's not an efficient way to work. Your landscape materials and your asset material should not be the same. Broken actor references, we had so many. And this was my job, was to go through and find them. Power of 2 textures. OK, tech artists, be sad. Look at that. Don't do that. That is really inefficient UV packing. Sigh. Moving on. I think my slides have disappeared. There we go. So one of the things with PCG is people were using mesh spawning in PCG, but they weren't actually setting any of the defaults for the meshes being spawned. Meaning everything was dynamic. Everything had no cull distance, had inappropriate shadow settings, and it really affected performance, because if you have a world of dynamic meshes, even if they're instanced, it's going to be less performant. So I went in to every PCG and created the default settings and plugged them in. I was a very unhappy camper that week. The repair errors button is your friend. Just hit it if it pops up. It won't break anything, but it will make your project run better. So we built a bunch of tools. Because, yeah, doing this manually is just impossible for 3 people. So we built a bunch of tools in Unreal, between the scriptable tools and the blutilities. You can build a lot of tooling. We built editor utility blueprints. So, for instance, I was talking about the skeletal mesh actors. We created a blutility that just swaps a skeletal mesh with the appropriate BP actor and then takes all the details from that skeletal mesh and plugs them in, and that means that we didn't have to manually replace all those skeletal meshes. It made life much easier. Also, we found that people, when they were creating blueprint assemblies of meshes, which was not a thing we wanted them to do in the first place, what they were doing is that defaults to creating each static mesh as a child actor, as opposed to just a static mesh component. And that is a really awful way to work. So we had to build a tool that broke those back up into the static meshes, and then we could reconstruct them. It's just one of those things, watch out for that when people are working. OK, we built validators. C++ asset validators were super useful. We were looking for non-static meshes, construction scripts, things that are on tick. If you're not using the C++ validator framework, you should be. If you don't want to write them yourselves, my colleague Ari has a really good set on his GitHub. Ari Bjornsson, download them, use them. You can also write validators in Blueprint, but they're a lot less flexible. You can basically check naming, things like that. But use asset validators. Here is an asset validator in action going, yeah, these are set up badly. One thing that we should have done is turn them on at the beginning, or at least in the middle, not at the end. So we did all of that. We started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And at this point, we started trying to package our project. And that was really hard, especially the mobile version. I need to give Arvind a huge hug for stepping through that. But mobile builds are really complicated. They have very specific rules on chunking. Start packaging your project earlier than we did, and you'll be a much happier person. We also realized that our incremental HLOD builds that Ari had set up for us were totally broken, but we didn't know why. Turns out there was one bad Niagara system with invalid bounds because its orientation vectors were set wrong. Because of this, world partition was unable to load it, and we had to track it down and kill it. So this was just one bad Niagara system. So standards really helped there, but also tools to track down stuff like this. So then we disconnected from our standalone DDC. And as it became cleaner, there was a real serious question, which is a lot of people had not finished their work. We didn't want to ship with a bunch of unfinished assets, but we also didn't want to ship with an empty world or cut out people's work and make them feel bad. So I finished it. We basically reviewed the entire map. I made this heat map here, and then Aaron, Sebastian, and I went in and just went through world partition grid by world partition grid, fixing everything up. and in this case, taking unfinished assets, turning them into finished assets, and so on. We did that, and it really actually showed how useful Unreal's tooling for open world is, because without one file per actor, without world partition, and without level instancing, this would have been a nightmare. But fortunately, when everything's instance, you just fix one thing, and it fixes all of the other versions of it. So, like, I took that fishing village with nothing to this really pretty fishing village in about an hour and a half, I think. It didn't take that long. And then we used PCG to fill out empty areas. This is an appropriate use of PCG. We found some really pretty graphs that people have made. We dropped them into the world, we optimized them, and suddenly flat terrain world becomes beautiful pine forest. I repainted the terrain, and then Aaron repainted my repaint. It is one of those things that people don't think about enough. Yes, you can, place your terrain layers procedurally. It is good to still do a terrain painting pass to really emphasize your assets. And then landscape sculpting, material painting, all of that turned our barren landscape into this. And we had plenty of unfinished business of our own. Mobile packaging, once again, zillion name conflicts. Really keep an eye on that. Validators are super useful for that. Engine content was being emitted from our cook process, but people were using engine content, which meant that there were a lot of problems when we were trying to package for ship. Camera control menus were unfinished, which meant Sebastian, our engineer, worked really hard. But one of the fun things he built, which ships with Titan that you might want to use, is he built a visual logger for the camera system. So you can see camera behavior and then play it back. Take that, use that to tune your own camera, and you will be much happier. Since I'm running out of time, I'm going real fast now. So what's next? I got 3 minutes to tell you what's next. If you have questions for me, I will be in the dev lounge this afternoon. I have another talk right after this, or I'd love to hang out and chat. But right now, we are leaning back into Titan. For the last 6 months, we've been working on the new templates and template variants, Project Parrot, and some of the things that aren't announced yet. But we're moving back into Titan to take it from what I think of as alpha to an actual shippable open world sample. So over the next 6 months, we're going to go back in and redo it all again. And so you're going to see me in a year doing another talk where I went, oh, we made so many mistakes. But that is what's next for Titan. We are going to be adding an objective system and quests and NPCs that actually do stuff, and basically turning it into an open world gameplay sample that is more representative than just, hey, check out all this cool art, while also having all this cool art. So at this point, I have reached the end of my talk. I have 2.5 minutes left. Do we have time to squeeze in one question? If anyone has any questions, we might be able to get one in there. Is there someone with a mic we could get questions to? There's a hand. Could we get this nice person a mic? If the question is, Sam, why are you so awesome? The answer is, I'm not. But I try.
Hello. My name is Kim,
Hi.
technical artist. I think the talk is very interesting in terms of it's
Thank you.
like what my job do on a daily basis. And I want to, because at the beginning and gradually throughout the presentation, you're referring to people making mistakes and then the team learning along the way. But could you share more about the process of like a tech reviewing or like figuring out when do people making those kind of mistakes, or like did you guys have like a tech review during the time of the projects, or like a weekly session, etc.?
So if really, yeah, so if I understand correctly, your question is sort of what was our process for identifying mistakes of people making, and how could we be proactive about it?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah, so this is a failing on our part. We were very reactive. We underestimated how inexperienced people were. So a lot of it was going, oh no, they're doing that. We need to stop that. It was very reactive. If we were smarter about it, if we did this again, which we're probably not going to, what I would have liked to have done is get some junior folks in early and have them make stuff and see what issues they ran into. And then we could have positioned our materials to help them. Instead, we built materials that we were sort of aimed at game developers and then put them in front of people who were not game developers. So really, we failed there, was my answer. We were very reactive. If I did it again, what I would have done is start with a small sample group, see what mistakes we made, and then go from there. So my answer is not a good answer, but it is an answer.
Yeah, I think it's clear.
There's a man up front with a microphone. I have 27 seconds. Let's go.
Thank you, Samuel. I'm Sergi, and I'm like owner of a studio that we are working on digital twins in Unreal Engine. So the question is, I saw that you have a lot of numbers. The team is really, really big. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
And the question, I see that you're planning to like make updates, make like a second edition of this game. So the question, I see that the problem that people do not look at the guides until the end. I mean, that they don't look at these documents. Maybe you found any life hacks how to like not to push people, like to make people more interesting to look at the guides for next time, so you will escape a lot of problems.
Put a link in your validator message. This is what I would say. Implement validators. In the validator warning, have a link to the documentation that they didn't read. That is a really good way to do it, because it said, you made this mistake, here is the documentation telling you what you should do properly. That is something, because no one reads. It drives me kind of crazy that no one reads when you build all these documents, but validators will save your life. And if you can have the validators tell them where to find the correct information, they'll be much happier. Also, we've introduced a batch renaming tool that really helps manage people not naming stuff properly. That really helps too. But yeah, if you can do asset validators and editor utility blueprints to kind of identify the issues, but inform people, not just go, this is bad, but here's how to fix it, then it will go much better. But yeah, educating people in advance is ideal, but you know, people are excited.
Am I right that you're just planning to send the link where they can find answers on the problem that they like appear, right? Okay, got it. Thanks.
And I think I'm out of time. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This has been an absolute pleasure.